Hello everyone, this is Juan here from Venus Flytraps, and today I'm going to show you how to repot a Venus Flytrap. When it comes to repotting Venus Flytraps, the best times to do it is when the plant is dormant. This will be between early winter to early spring. You want to avoid repotting Venus Flytraps during the growing season, that's being late spring and summer, because once the plant is actively growing, there is more stress when it is repotted. So you have a higher chance of getting plants into shock, and they're gonna have a longer time for them to recover. In addition to that, during the summer, temperatures are much hotter, and that gives more stress to the plant. So avoid repotting them during the growing season, avoid repotting them during summer, or else they're gonna take longer to recover. Right here I have a Dionaea bimbo. It does not look like a bimbo, sadly, but this is the plant I'm going to be reporting today. I'm showing you how to do it. As you can notice, the traps are very close to the ground, they're very short. This shows how the plant looked like during dormancy. So this plant is currently dormant and is ready for a nice repot. Now, first thing you have to do now is taking the plant out of the pot and removing all the old soil. This is what Venus flytraps look like underneath the ground. They have this very scaly bulb, and it is very common for them to produce daughter plants. So this is the original plant, and then these ones are little daughter plants that the plant produce. So whenever you're repotting your plants and you notice they have this plant too, they can be easily removed, and then you can pot them individually, and then you can have more plants than just one. So So now we end up with 3 different plants, or at least 3 separate plants. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm simply gonna take a scissors and I'm gonna cut all the dead leaves, all the black and dead foliage, just to have them clean. Removing dead foliage is very good for the plants, any plants, because this will prevent mold to grow on those leaves, which can cause other problems in your plants. So keeping plants clean and free of just dead foliage is very good, and I highly recommend it. So just take your time, clean and cut any dead foliage. Alright, here we have our Dionaea bimbo. I already cleaned all the dead foliage. I also spray with water some of the old soil off. As you can see, we have a big clean rhizome, very healthy, very vigorous. And now it's ready for our next step, which is getting the pot ready with soil and then eventually pot the rhizome. It's important to mention that the Venus flytraps have more of like vertical growing roots. They can be quite long. So for this case, the best pots to use are deeper pots. You want to try to avoid using shallow pots for most carnivorous plants, honestly. So in this case, I'm going to be using this deeper pot than the previous one, and it should provide plenty of space for it to grow and develop and then produce more little Venus flytraps. So before putting the soil in the pot, I'm going to do something that I like doing, is I'm going to put a little bit of sphagnum moss at the bottom of the pot to cover the drainage holes. This will prevent the peat moss that I'm going to be using from falling through the drainage holes. And overall, I think it just helps with drainage and a little bit of air circulation through the roots. Now that I have the bottom of the pot covered with a little bit of sphagnum moss, now the pot is ready for the soil. For soil, I'm using a 50% peat moss and 50% perlite mix. It's important to mention that it has to be fertilizer free, both the peat moss and both the perlite. So if you're trying to shop for peat moss or perlite, you want to avoid buying Miracle Grow brand because they add fertilizer to both the peat moss and both the perlite. So either go for organic or make sure it has no fertilizer added. And then, like I said, it's 50% of each ingredient. I like to add one more part of perlite to my peat moss. So if I'm using 5 parts peat moss, I'll be using 6 parts of perlite. I think having a little bit more perlite helps with drainage, helps with airflow, and prevent having issues with soil going bad or going sour, or soil getting compacted, and then which can cause problems in the roots and kill plants. So this is the soil I use. Remember to use fertilizer free and 50% of each. So now I'm gonna put the soil in the pot. Another thing that's important to mention is that when you're filling pots with soil, you want to make sure you put it and you put a lot of strength with doing it. You want to pack those pots very, very tight. If you were to pour the soil without trying to pack it on the pot, what's going to happen is that eventually as you water, that soil is going to shrink. All the little pockets that you left without doing the pushing, they're going to essentially shrink. And it's going to cause the soil to become compacted, and it's going to cause the soil to become anaerobic. It's going to be very bad airflow through the soil. And what happened to me before, when I wasn't doing this, tightly packing the pots, the soil will shrink, and then it will eventually smell like sulfur because it wasn't getting enough airflow. And then the plants that I had on those pots will eventually decay and die. So it sounds contradictory that by tightly packing the soil on the pots you prevent soil compaction, but that's the truth. So I very highly recommend that when you're packing this mixture of peat moss and perlite for carnivorous plants, make sure you pack it very tight and make sure that your fingers are not able to go down on the soil. So okay, now I have the pot tightly packed with soil. As you can see, if I push down, my fingers don't go through the soil. This is a good sign that the pot is very tightly packed with soil. Now I'm gonna make a hole for the plant, and I like going to the center, that way the plant has more space to spread around and produce more daughter plants. So now we have a hole deep enough and big enough for a rhizome. I'm going to proceed to plant it. When planting Venus flytraps, it's important to know the depth. If you plant it too in the surface, the plant won't do very well, and if you plant it too deep, the plant won't grow as well either. So I like to go around this line. I will dig this rhizome up here, and that is the way I like doing it, and I always have good results doing it. Usually this is the part that you only see above ground, so if you go up a little bit beyond that, you're burying the rhizome a little bit too deep. So about this line or this depth for Venus flytraps will be the best. If you are not sure, you can usually notice the white part doesn't get sunlight. So as you go up, the greener they get, those are the parts that are exposed to light. So you definitely don't want to bury it over here because this will be not deep enough. So go about this deep for Venus flytraps. Now what I'm doing is I'm just pushing the soil around the hole, make sure it's having contact with the roots, make sure the plant is tightly held by the soil. When planting Venus flytraps, it's very important that you don't push directly into the rhizome because you might end up breaking it and you can harm the plant. So when potting it, if you need to bring it down, you can use twizzlers. Just grab it by the middle of the rhizome and push it down slowly. Or just push from the sides, but never push directly on top of the rhizome because you might end up breaking it. Once I put the plant into the pot and I have it secure with the soil and I push the soil around the rhizome, one thing that I like doing for every Venus flytrap that I repot is that I like to water it from the top until the water drips out of the pot. I like doing this because it helps the soil settle down into the pot. It helps the soil fill some of the holes that were left when we plant the plant. And overall, I think it's just good for the soil overall, just having one over the top watering. So just kind of water it until it drains. Okay, our plant is now potted and I already watered it until it drained from the bottom. So it is essentially good to go now. You can place your plant now on direct sunlight or whatever it was before you repot it. And this should be all you need to do. One more step that I like doing that is totally optional is that I like putting a thin layer of coarse silica sand. Now what this layer of coarse silicon sand do is that it acts like a mulch in the way that it protects the soil a little bit against the heat from the sun, and it prevents moss and algae from growing on the top of the soil. Not only that, I found out that here in the south where I grow these plants, during the summer it is very, very hot here. And what I experience is that the top part of the pit moss tends to get a little bit burned or dry, almost like a crust. So when I use this layer of silica sand, it provides some protection to it and the soil underneath doesn't become crusty or dry. So like I said, this is a totally optional step, but it has some benefits to it. So what I do is I simply cover the surface with thin layer of coarse silica sand. For those of you watching and want to try this, whatever you do, avoid using just plain river sand or beach sand or clay sand, because some of those sands might contain salts and other minerals that might harm the plant. The best sand to use is silica sand because it basically provides nothing to the soil, so it's safe to use. Other alternatives that people use is blasting sand. It usually is also silica sand, but the key here is that you want to use coarse sand. Don't use just very fine grade sand. It's not going to do much good for the plant. It will become solid and it's really not visibly pleasant, and since it becomes like a solid crust, I don't think it's going to be good for airflow as well. So this is it. Here we have our Dionaea bimbo all potted and ready to go. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. We're also on Facebook and Instagram if you want to check some of our plants. I'm also going to be posting the link to our online store where you can find the plants that we grow and sell, as well as some cool shirts like this one. And hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope it was useful. I'll see you guys next time.